You've probably heard coral reefs called the tropical rainforests of the sea, and for good reason. But right now, they're in the middle of a massive global crisis. We are literally watching the fourth global mass bleaching event unfold, all thanks to unbelievable ocean heat. So today, we're going to look at a pretty radical plan. One designed not just to save a few corals here and there, but to preserve their entire future.
So, first things first, we need to be crystal clear about the stakes. You see, a bleached coral is a stressed coral, but it's not necessarily a dead one. They can and often do recover. Reefs are tough, but when a heat wave gets so bad that it wipes out an entire species on that reef, well, that's a whole different story. That loss is forever. That genetic code is gone, and the reef's ability to ever fully recover takes a huge hit.
And that is exactly why we're calling this a permanent crisis. Just, waiting around and hoping for recovery after every single heat wave, that's just not a strategy anymore. When you're facing the real risk of losing entire species for good, you have to think differently. You have to get proactive.
And what's at risk here? It's almost hard to wrap your head around. About a quarter, 1 out of every 4 known marine species depends on these incredible structures for food, for home, for a safe place to raise their young. If these ecosystems collapse, that wave of devastation ripples through the entire ocean food web. It's a catastrophic loss on a truly global scale.
The fourth. This is the fourth time we've seen a global mass bleaching event. Think about that. Something that used to be this rare, shocking event is now, well, it's becoming the new, terrifying normal. And each time it happens, it weakens the world's reefs just a little bit more, giving them less and less time to bounce back before the next wave of heat arrives.
Okay, so with a reality that grim, where do we even start to look for a solution? Well, it turns out the answer might be hiding in plain sight, literally right underneath the reefs we're trying to save. The whole concept is based on some really simple physics. Just tapping into the naturally cold water that's only a few meters below that dangerously hot surface.
I mean, the temperature difference is just staggering. While the surface water is literally boiling the corals alive at 31 to 34 degrees Celsius, you go just 30 meters down and the water is a steady 10 degrees colder. That's an enormous thermal resource, a natural air conditioner just sitting there, waiting, right out of reach. So how do you get that cold water up to the surface where the corals actually are? The answer is something called the airlift pumping principle, and it's a surprisingly simple and really robust piece of tech. Instead of relying on complicated motors and propellers, you're just using the basic force of buoyancy. You just inject air at the bottom of a pipe, you make the water inside that pipe lighter than the water outside, and, well, physics does the rest. All right, let's dive into how these principles all come together in what is honestly a truly elegant machine. The way this solar-powered system works is just beautifully simple, but it is incredibly effective. The whole process is really kind of beautiful in its simplicity. It all starts with a small solar array. We're talking just 4 standard panels that powers an air compressor sitting on a floating buoy. That compressor just pumps regular air down a 30-meter pipe. When that air gets released at the bottom, the bubbles make the water inside the pipe way less dense. And here's the magic trick. The heavier, denser water outside the pipe naturally pushes the lighter air and water mixture up. And just like that, you're delivering cold, deep water right onto the reef.
Now, to make this whole thing work as efficiently as possible, you're aiming for something called slug flow. So instead of a fine mist of tiny bubbles, imagine creating big air bubbles that pretty much fill the pipe. They act like little pistons, pushing big columns or slugs of water up ahead of them. It's the most efficient way to use the least amount of energy to lift the most water.
And all of that simplicity, it leads to a system that is incredibly robust. The real genius of this tech for the ocean is what it doesn't have. There are 0 moving parts down in the salt water that can break or need maintenance. No propellers that are going to get jammed up with sand, no electrical parts sitting in the water that are guaranteed to corrode, and this is a big one, no mechanical blades that could shred tiny, delicate organisms like coral larvae. This thing is designed to survive out there. Okay, now we have to be realistic here. Let's talk about scale. This idea is not about cooling down the entire Pacific Ocean. The goal here is much more strategic, it's targeted. It's about creating a whole network of lifeboats, these small protected zones, not trying to fix global warming with a single machine. So what does that actually look like in the real world? Well, our math shows that just one of these 4-panel systems could pump up about 371.5 cubic meters of cold water over a sunny 12-hour day. To give you some perspective, that's enough water to fill a typical backyard swimming pool about 7 times.
Now, I know that might sound like just a drop in the ocean for a huge atoll, but it's a total game changer for one of the thousands of small, isolated patch reefs you find in lagoons all over the world. For a reef that's maybe 50 to 100 meters across, that constant flow of cold water is absolutely enough to create a real thermal refuge, a little safe zone where corals can actually survive the worst of a heat wave.
Honestly, the best way to picture this whole strategy, think of it like island hopping, but in reverse. The plan is to create this network of cool water sanctuaries that basically act as genetic banks. The big idea is that when global conditions finally start to get better, larvae from these healthy islands can then hop over to the surrounding dead zones, reseeding them and rebuilding the reefs we lost. It's a strategy of preserving life now for restoration later. So what's the price tag on one of these lifeboats? Well, our estimate for a full 4-panel system, that's including the solar panels, the compressor, the pipe, all the marine-grade mooring, comes out to about $6,100. When you think about how large-scale conservation projects can easily run into the millions, that is an unbelievably accessible cost for creating a single, life-saving refuge. So where does all this leave us? Look, this is not a silver bullet. We have to face the future with our eyes wide open, understanding both the incredible potential of this idea and, yeah, its potential problems. This is all about bridging a critical gap in time. And of course there are, right? Anytime you try to engineer a solution in a natural ecosystem, you're going to have trade-offs. The biggest question mark here is about what else we might be bringing up from the deep along with all that nice cold water. So here's the fundamental trade-off, right? Deep ocean water is usually packed with nutrients. Pumping it up onto a shallow reef could actually fuel algae growth, and that algae might compete with the corals. But we have to be brutally honest about the alternative. The alternative is a dead, bleached reef, a literal underwater desert. So the choice really comes down to this: a living reef that maybe has a manageable algae problem or a coral graveyard. And really, that brings us right back to the core mission here. This isn't about trying to perfectly preserve a reef in a museum display case. It's about making sure the genetic building blocks survive. We are talking about creating lifeboats that are filled with all the diverse species that the next generation is going to need if they have any hope of rebuilding these underwater worlds. So, let's wrap this up. The technology? It's simple. The physics? It's solid. The cost? It's manageable. The math shows us this is actually possible. The big question isn't about engineering anymore. It's about our will. Do we, as a global community, have the will to build these lifeboats, to bridge this dangerous gap in time, and give one of our planet's most vital ecosystems a real fighting chance?